Coming up in a moment, President Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe summons his MPs after his terrible speech mix-up in Parliament yesterday. Then a South African court rejects the state's bid to appeal a ruling as regards letting President Omar al-Bashir of Sudan to leave the country.
It has been, among all the operations I myself, one of the most difficult.
And later on, Russia and Angola take a stand on the South Sudan crisis as they oppose moves to impose further sanctions on the world's newest country. Hello there and welcome. This is Network Africa on Channels Television with me, Cynthia Are. Yesterday was nothing short of an embarrassing one for Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe, who's gone ahead to summon MPs to a special session after he read out the wrong speech at the opening of Parliament. He accidentally read the same State of the Nation address he had already delivered on the 25th of August. The 91-year-old president is expected to deliver the correct speech during a meeting which will hold today. The error has been blamed on a mix-up in the president's secretarial office and has also prompted questions from members of the opposition over whether the president remains fit to lead the country.
President Robert Mugabe arrived at Parliament in a vintage black Rolls-Royce car with his wife Grace and inspected a guard of honor. The 91-year-old leader was also treated to a fly-past by 3 fighter jets and to a 21-gun salute. Mugabe, the only ruler the Southern African nation has known since it was recognized in 1980, delivered the same speech he gave on August the 25th, pinning his hopes on China to help revive Zimbabwe's struggling economy. President Mugabe finished the speech without interruption, and his spokesman blamed officials, adding that the president would read the correct speech at a later date. But the main opposition Movement for Democratic Change, MDC, which is critical of Mugabe's long rule, said the blunder called into question the president's fitness to hold office.
We don't expect such a thing, especially at a time when we are expecting some guidance on how to lift our country out of the economic troubles that we find ourselves in. So I'm sure they will dust this up. It's an embarrassing situation which I think should not be repeated.
President Mugabe shows no visible signs of illness and has denied reports that he suffers from prostate cancer. He has dismissed falling at Harare Airport on April the 4th as a simple slip. However, another Harare resident said that this mistake shows that it's time for President Mugabe to hands off the reins to a younger crop of leaders.
It shows that the time is up for the president. He has to hand over the baton to other crop of leaders who can take this country forward. In other words, this actually shows that he is now out of touch with reality. And also, as it stands, the economy has reached a nosedive. There is no development that is taking place. Unemployment is skyrocketing. People are jobless. They are hungry. There is nothing to talk about here in Zimbabwe in as much as the economy is concerned.
The opposition booed and heckled President Mugabe about the deteriorating economy during his last speech in August. MDC Member of Parliament Innocent Gonese told Parliament that the MDC would disrupt proceedings to protest against anonymous death threats to opposition MPs if they heckled Mugabe again. Speaker of Parliament Jacob Mudenda, however, warned the MDC they would face contempt charges. Broadcasting was then suspended before President Mugabe started his speech.
For more on this unfortunate event, we go live to London where Mr. Warwick Onyema, our African news analyst, is standing by. Mr. Onyema, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Cynthia.
I'd like to ask your thoughts on concerning this embarrassing development.
Well, the first thing that strikes me is, although there may have been a mess up, an act of incompetence in the back office in presenting him with the same speech he had already given just a few weeks earlier. The fact is that Mugabe read through the speech without once recognizing that he was repeating things he had said before. And so he read the speech from start to finish without any acknowledgement that the blunder had been made. As far as he was concerned, he had absolutely no recognition whatsoever that he had previously read exactly the same speech.
Isn't that troubling to know that he went from start to finish and didn't, recognize that, even if there was a mix-up in the background from his secretarial office?
To be honest with you, I think the question of what happened in the secretarial office is neither here nor there. As you rightly imply, the worrying thing is that he read exactly the same speech without even recognizing that was the fact. It suggests that his memory is poor and probably deteriorating, which is probably why the opposition has reacted in asking that it's time for him to step down, that his shelf life has expired, and that he's well past his sell-by date, and the time has come to pass the baton on.
Now, that is another point, Mr. Onyema. Despite what his critics say, he seems to be what the majority of Zimbabweans are content with, even though some have clearly opposed that. Why do you think that is the case, that they do not want another leader besides President Mugabe?
Well, I think there are those, first of all, who actually benefit by his remaining in office, even if his own performance and perceptions are deteriorating. There are those who have a vested interest, who have enriched themselves as a consequence of Mugabe being where he is, and who would like him to continue there. But the other thing is that, don't forget, that the majority of the electorate are illiterate, rural dwellers who are easily cowed into voting where they're told. If the goons put pressure upon them, of ZANU-PF put pressure on them. It's the same in every other African country, where most of the electorate are stone illiterate and quite unable to determine for themselves what's in their best interest.
Now, my final question is, we already know that the West does not take the African Union seriously, of which President Robert Mugabe is the chairman. How do you think incidents like this will affect the perception of the Union, which already has a relatively battered image?
Well, I think you can say that the West will perceive this as a typical example of why the African Union can't be taken seriously, why they can't be expected to intervene effectively in any African matter that requires strong governance. It would also be true that the leadership or the chairmanship of the African Union may be an entirely symbolic position anyway. And then when it comes to the nitty-gritty of decision-making, the chairman is bypassed and all the work is done in the back office. But frankly, I mean, the African Union in the West has almost no regard and very little respect for profile.
Mr. Warwick Onyema, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cynthia, and long live President Mugabe.
Long live President Mugabe. Thank you very much. African news analyst Mr. Warwick Onyema speaking with us from London. Now, according to a radio broadcast, a South African court has rejected the state's bid to appeal a ruling that authorities had erred in letting Sudan's President Omar al-Bashir leave the country, despite a court order barring him from doing so. The judges in this case say President Bashir did not enjoy diplomatic immunity against a global arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court. The Sudanese president, who was also in South Africa for an African Union summit in June, was allowed to depart from Khartoum, even though a Pretoria court had issued an order banning him from leaving. President Jacob Zuma last month defended the government's failure to detain President Bashir, saying that the wanted leader had immunity as a guest of the AU. Still to come on Network Africa. Egypt says it's killed as many as 55 militants in the Sinai Peninsula, and we have the latest concerning the Mexicans who were mistakenly killed by Egypt's security forces on Monday.